Masters 3 Berlin is the last big international tournament before Champions at the end of the year, and also the last chance for these teams to earn points for Champions at the end of the year. Totaling to 16 of the top teams from every major Valorant region. Last time at Masters Reykjavik, we saw Sentinels dominate everyone, placing first, not dropping a single game the whole tournament, with EU's Fnatic coming second and Korea's New Turn coming third. Masters 2 was also the first international tournament, as Masters 1 was still region locked due to COVID, but what we saw were that the top regions were NA and EU. Returning back home for a 3-month training period, the top teams are now back and ready to prove themselves, upping from 10 teams to 16 teams for Masters 3 Berlin. There are a lot of storylines going into this new tournament, so let me help you contextualize all of it. Welcome back to another episode of Off the Dome. My name is Dominic, and today I'm giving you everything you need to know about Masters 3 Berlin. Now, to make this video easier to digest, because I know there's going to be a lot of stuff, I've broken it down into different sections. First, I'm going to go over the tournament itself, what it means for the whole VCT series, as well as what the tournament means within its own confined space. Then I'm going to go over each of the 16 teams attending Masters 3 Berlin, how they got there, who's on the team, who to look out for, basically to help you as a viewer guide to what to watch. Then I'll go over kind of an overview of the tournament and the format, so like the pools, how it's going to all shake out, as well as some people to look out for and some teams to look out for. Finally, I'll give my own predictions and what I think on the tournament as a whole. There's going to be timestamps below, so please feel free to jump around. You don't need to watch everything, and I apologize, my voice is still kind of nasally. I'm just getting off of getting sick. The Masters series of tournaments are the biggest mid-season events in the VCT Valorant circuit. Masters are where you can earn the most points for Champions, as well as compete on the global stage. Only the top of the top teams get to compete here. From what we saw in Masters 2, the biggest regions are North America and EU, having the largest player base and also the most competitive teams. Following that, we saw teams like Korea doing well. Then we saw the other regions kind of lacking behind, regions like LATAM, SEA, so they're going to need to prove themselves on this new stage. The tournament is about a week long, taking place from September 9th to September 19th. There's going to be a knockout pool stage, which leads into a bracket. Not only will the winner of the tournament be auto-seeded into Champions, with a lot of reoccurring teams being able to actually get these spots for Champions instead of having to play in the last chance qualifier. But what about the teams? Let's go over each team and talk about them individually. Let's start off with North America, where I'm most proficient in, and I feel like a lot of my viewers actually already know a lot of North American history, so I'll kind of skim through this. The number one seed from North America is, of course, the Sentinels. The number one team in the world came back from a clean sweep at Iceland and destroyed everyone in North America. In the 12 games they played since Masters 2, they have lost a single one to XSET, where they went on into losers and beat them in grand finals. They have some of the best players in the world with Sick and Tens, the best IGL, Shazam, as well as two clutch lords in Dapper and Zoms. There's no doubt that they'll do well in this tournament, going in as the number one seed from North America, but will the top European teams be able to take them down? If not, it looks like they are poised to win the tournament and secure their spot at Champions. Last time we saw version 1 taking the spot, but this time we see two of the other North American powerhouses taking the final 2 slots. 100 Thieves has been one of the staples of North American Valorant, winning the First Strike tournament at the end of 2020 over TSM, looking incredibly strong. And they've had very strong showings in most of the Masters and playoff performances, but just missed out on making it to Reykjavik last time. So while this will be their first international tournament, I feel like they actually have a bit of a leg up, as it will be their first LAN tournament, but not the first LAN tournament for many of their players. They have a lot of CSGO veterans. Ethan, Steele, Hiko, Nitro have all been veteran in CSGO and are still just as good in Valorant. Austin, it will be his first LAN, but I have no doubt that he'll be perfectly fine. But the rest of these players, I feel like they'll be almost back at home playing at LAN, so I think they'll actually do better than they did when it was just the online era. I'm interested to see how they do, and while they still struggle to beat Sentinels, I think they can still put up a good fight in the tournament. The last slot from North America, and definitely not the worst team, is Team Envy. Envy, again, an incredibly strong team, has done insanely well in a lot of tournaments, but is generally the best team that has never won anything. They choke a lot, especially if you take a look at the Masters 1 results. In Masters 1, Team Envy put up a good fight, and they were looking poised to win going in, but they actually struggled and placed 4th. In the playoffs for Masters 2, again, placed 4th. They're a very, very solid team, even taking sets off the Sentinels in the early days, but they struggled. However, at the beginning of the playoffs, they picked up Ye. Ye had some of the best stats in the game, but was not on the best team, so he missed out on a lot. He missed out on a lot of tournaments. After Inbox was out of not only the playoffs, but also the last chance qualifiers, there was a bidding war to see who would pick up Ye. He ended up replacing Mame from Envy and going on there, and I shit you not, every single game he's played on Envy since joining the team, he has top fragged. He is just that good at the game. He has proved himself many, many times that he is the real deal. With Envy's new edition of Ye, I want to see how they will do on the global stage. This will be their first time competing there. As well, I want to see how Ye will do compared to some of the other best Jets from other regions. It'll be a fun time. North America as a region has always been, it's been one tournament. North America as a region has historically looked the best. Now it's in close contention with EU, but so far they have gotten the leg up. Moving on to EU, they actually have a completely new set of teams representing the region this time, and arguably even more successful. Let's start off with the number 1 seed, that's Gambit from Russia. Gambit is the best team in Russia and absolutely swept through the entire CIS region, not dropping a game. Actually, they dropped a couple games. After just missing out on Reykjavik after a loss to Fnatic, they came back in stage 3 and put on a clinic. They lost to the best EU team, ACEND, in the semifinals, but made their way through losers bracket, beating every single other EMEA Berlin qualifier to win the playoffs. In CSGO, Russia has always been an absolute dominant region. So by extension in Valorant, it looks like they should be very good. Being the number 1 seed, beating the European representatives, beating the Turkey representatives, they are de facto the best team from the EMEA region. By the way, EMEA is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is kind of crazy because Middle East and Africa have their own region, but aren't in this playoff. It's actually a combination of Europe, Russia, the CIS, and Turkey. The player you should look out for on this team is Nats. He is not the same duelist carry that we see on a lot of North America teams. You have your Wardell, you have your Tens, you have your Yays. Nats is actually a support player. He plays Sentinels, but is still fragging out every day. It's crazy to see him play. He's like a mountain for this team. Unmovable. If any team at this tournament has a chance to beat the Sentinels, it's gonna be Gambit. Gambit is the number 1 seed out of Europe, beaten a lot of teams, and is very, very adaptable. Definitely look out to see how they'll do in the tournament. The number 2 seed from Europe is just as interesting, honestly. It is Supermassive Blaze, and yes, their name does sound like it was named by a 4-year-old. This team is a super team of the best Turkish players playing in Turkey. It started by Blaze Esports, and they picked up the best Turkish players from every top EMEA team. Brave and Izzy from Kefler Esports, Turco from Oxygen, which is the best Turkish team, P.O.R from Team Heretics, and Russ from BBL. This super team absolutely destroyed the Turkish region and went on to play second in the EMEA playoff. They actually got there from winner's side as well, beating, who'd they beat? SMB has the next best chance, just behind Gambit, of taking down the Sentinels. Now, while they're still pretty new, just forming just at the beginning of stage 3, they could have some team issues, but their team, again, they're so good. The 3rd seed from EMEA is ACEND. Now, ACEND has been historically the best European team, always qualifying as soon as possible to get into playoffs. But last time for Masters 2, they just missed out again, getting upset. After some time off from stage 2, going to stage 3, they wiped the floor with every top EU team one after another, beating Giants, BDS, Rix, FPX, Guild to make it to the top EU seed for the EMEA playoff. They then beat the top Russian teams, Na'Vi and Gambit, to take the 3rd spot for Masters 3. The thing to look out for on this team is their player, CNED. CNED has been claimed to be the best Jet in the world, even better than that of Tens and Ye. CNED's opping is that good. Finally seeing him on the global stage and going up against the Sentinels, I want to see how that matchup of CNED versus Tens will go. They're both two very, very good players and two very good teams. Now, while I think ACEND is behind the other top team from Turkey and Russia, I think they'll still put an incredibly good showing for the tournament, and we'll see how they do. The final slot from the EMEA region is G2, another, why'd I say it like that? G2, another super team out of Europe, starting in the very early days of Valorant, signing Mixwell, a very well-known CSGO player. We all know him. Now, they didn't have the great success as they did in the early Valorant, kind of doing all right in Masters 2 and 3. They actually rebuilt at the beginning of stage 3 and built an absolute super team again. Similar to the Turkish team, the best Turkish players from all around, G2 actually just took the best European players from around and built it around Mixwell again. And while their performance was all right in the playoff bracket, they ended up taking the 4th spot, just beating Liquid to take it. So while G2 is the last seed of the tournament, they also have the first shot against the Sentinels, playing them in round 1. They'll be the first guard of EU versus NA. NA trying to hold its throne while G2 try and usurp it. The next region we're going to talk about is Korea, arguably the third best region in the world. Their position is definitely not as stable as North America and Europe, so they will have to prove themselves at this tournament. And their number one representative is Vision Strikers. Now, Vision Strikers is probably one of the most well-known international teams in the world. Literally just leading up to Masters 2, they were undefeated, having an 102 win streak, until losing just before making it to Masters 2, losing to NewTurn. NewTurn was the representative for Korea, but now we have the dominant Vision Strikers as they came back in Stage 3 and again, just bodied everyone. They didn't drop a single game until their grand finals against the second seed, proving that they are once again at the top of Korea. Now, I've actually already made a video about this, but they have a 6-man roster, and a functioning one at that, where they swap players in and out mid-sets. Vision Strikers is one of the biggest teams you need to look out for, because not only do they have to prove themselves on the international stage, needing to beat some of the top teams to prove that Korea is the third best region in the world, maybe even trying to do more than that, but they also need to prove as a team that this 6-man roster configuration can work. The second representative from Korea is someone that I'm not as familiar with. It's actually F4Q. Now, F4Q has never been one of the most dominant teams in Korea. They were the team to actually take the Vision Strikers' 102 win streak record. They've never really been in the top echelon of Korean Valorant, alongside that of Vision Strikers, NewTurns, Damwon, etc. But they've proven themselves and beating some of the best Korean teams to make it here. There have been rumors that F4Q is actually being picked up by a North American organization, and whether that means they're going to be still playing out of Korea if they're coming to North America, I'm not entirely sure. But they have the second seed from Korea in the Berlin tournament. And while I don't watch Korea so closely that I know all the ins and outs of F4Q, again, very similar to Vision Strikers, they need to hold their ground and prove that Korea is one of the better regions in Valorant. Now, the next region I'm going to talk about is Japan, and Japan is one of my personal favorite regions to watch in Valorant. The experience of watching Japanese Valorant is really interesting, especially from North America, because the broadcasts are not in English, they're all in Japanese, including the game sounds all being in Japanese. It's kind of like watching an anime, but with real people, especially when you have such a weird power dynamic at the top of the Japanese Valorant scene. There are 3 big Japanese teams. Crazy Raccoons, who we saw at Masters 2, ZETA Division, who rebranded recently and were previously Absolute Jupiter, as well as Northern Eption. Hope I'm saying that right. Crazy Raccoon and Absolute Jupiter have been at the top of the Japanese Valorant scene for a while, trading back and forth grand final sets, but Northern Eption has a point to prove as they have the Korean Jet themselves, Soldum, on the team. There are 3 top teams in Japan, but only 2 representative spots, so it was a tight title battle. In the semifinals, we saw Northern Eption actually beat ZETA Division, dropping ZETA Division down into losers. But what we saw was that ZETA Division went back, beat Northern Eption again, and beat Crazy Raccoons in the finals to take the number 1 slot from Japan. ZETA Division is the team that look like goons, and I think that's very funny, looking like literal anime characters, and Crazy Raccoons, the more clean-cut type. ZETA Division has a 6-man roster, which again, very similar to Korean Valorant, they need to kind of uphold this stats saying this is a viable option to do. But what's even crazier is a number 2 seed, Crazy Raccoons, because they don't have a 6-man roster, they have a 7-man roster. Now, this is another reason why Japanese Valorant is super interesting to watch, because look at this grand final set, best of 5 against these 2 teams. Crazy Raccoons didn't play the same formation more than 2 games in a row. They have 3 mainstays and they rotate the last 2 players out, in and out, for what they want. It's kind of weird looking at it, and it's definitely an interesting style of Valorant that a lot of North American and European teams probably haven't seen. But how will Japan as a region perform? Because Japan didn't perform super well in Masters 2, and I think, unfortunately, it'll be very similar in Masters 3, as Japan as a region isn't really known for their first-person tactical shooter gameplay. They're more in the midfield of region, so they'll need to do as best as they can, beating as many teams as they can. Maybe upset Korea, maybe upset Brazil. I'm very interested to see how they'll do. Moving down just a little bit geographically, we have SEA, Southeast Asia, where they get 2 slots. Last time we saw X10 taking it for SEA as the spot for Masters 2, but actually they didn't even make it to the bracket portion of the playoffs for Masters 3. It's unfortunate, but we do get to see new representatives. The number 1 seed out of SEA is BREN Esports, a Philippine team that has been around for a bit, but really stepped up their game in Stage 3. They have placed no higher than 5th in any previous playoffs, but truly went to town in Stage 3, winning the playoffs as a whole, getting number 1. The second seed we get to see from SEA is Paper Rex, a Singaporean team. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Singaporean, who has properly beat every big SEA team before, but did end up placing second in the tournament. What's interesting about this team is that they have a very interesting player on the team, Forsaken. Forsaken has the best stats on VLRGG, even beating that of Ye, Tens, Shazam, all these other top players by just raw stats alone. This will be his big opportunity to prove himself on the global stage, to see if he really is all that or if it's just a regional bias. As you can tell by this explanation, I'm not a huge follower of the SEA scene, but I thought I'd give you just a little preface on what you should look out for these teams. Moving all the way to the other end of the world, I guess I probably should have started with this first. Down from North America, we're going to Brazil. Brazil is another really strong region in CSGO, and thus they had two teams for their region. And again, it's not the two teams that we saw last time, as Team Vikings and Team Sharks both fell out early in the Masters 3 playoffs. With the number 1 seed, VIVO. This team was picked up at the beginning of Stage 3 and missed out of qualifying for playoffs in Challengers 1 and 2, but made it through in Challengers 3. After losing to the previous Masters Reykjavik representative, Sharks, they actually beat every top Brazilian team, including the Gamelanders, Sharks, Team Vikings, Furia, and then HAVAN Liberty, the number 2 seed, to win playoffs as the top seed from BR. The player you can look out on this team is Heat. He is absolutely crazy, a very well-known Tier 2 CSGO player, and he came over to Valorant and is playing very, very hot. The name, you know. The second seed you want to look out for is HAVAN Liberty. They're a team that has slowly been growing through 2021. They missed out on qualifying for Masters 1, losing to BR Tier 2 and Tier 3 teams. Did considerably better in Stage 2, taking a set off the Gamelanders, but placed 4th in the playoffs. But with a bit of a shaky start in Stage 3, they picked up the pace and took sets and sets off of BR's best. To get to playoffs, they beat the number 1 seed VIVO, and then went on to beat Iceland qualifiers Team Vikings, Star Horizon, and Furia to make it to the Grand Finals, securing their spot. Again, we know they lost to VIVO in the Grand Finals, but they've done a very solid job nonetheless. Brazil has been a very unstable region in terms of the top team. At the beginning, we saw the rise of the Gamelanders as they dominated the region for a while, but then we saw a bit of Team Vikings taking over the region. Neither teams actually qualified for Berlin. It's refreshing to see a sort of meteoric rise of HAVAN Liberty, showing that this region is starting to get a bit of stability, that the teams can grow and get better and earn their spots at the top. Brazil is another one of those regions that have something to prove, as they were thought to be the 3rd best region in the world, with Korea actually taking that 3rd place spot at Masters 2. Brazil has been in the compound training. Let's see if they can come back and prove themselves as the next best thing in Valorant. Finally, we actually get a little bit of stability from the LATAM region, Latin America, as we see Crew back in action from the last Masters qualifier. They came back from Masters 2 and just put on a clinic in the LATAM region. This predominantly Chilean and Argentinian team have been battling it out with Astrals for the top spot in LATAM. These two teams have battled 8 times in the past year, trading on matches with Crew, winning out 5 of the 8 times. Again, this is what we saw in the Grand Final set, with Crew taking it once again. Crew put on a good performance last time, but let's see if they can pick up the pace and prove that their dominance in the region is not just regional, and maybe they can bring this as a worldwide scale. That is now every team going to Masters 3 Berlin, and hopefully that gives you a little more context for what's going on in this tournament. Let's go over a little bit of the format for the tournament and some of my predictions. The group stage is a 4-team double elimination tournament. The top 2 make it to the single elimination final bracket. In Group A, we see Vision Strikers, Paper Rex, Supermassive Blaze, and ACEND. Oh my god, what the fuck? That's the teams? With the first matchup being Vision Strikers versus Paper Rex and Supermassive Blaze versus ACEND. This is unfortunate for Supermassive Blaze and ACEND, as it will be the first regional team kill in the very first match. The second seed from EMEA and the third seed from EMEA have to play each other in round 1, and last time we saw Supermassive Blaze actually take it. Seems like Vision Strikers will make it there, but they'll have to beat one of Supermassive Blaze or ACEND to qualify. Out of Group B, we see Keystar versus Team Envy and Crew versus Zeta Division. Keystar being the number 1 Brazilian team versus the number 3 North American team, Team Envy, and number 1 LATAM versus number 1 Japan. This seems like more of a relaxed group, although there's a lot of number 1s, number 1 Brazil, number 1 Japan, number 1 LATAM. The question is, will Team Envy, the 3rd seed, if they can beat all of them, that really proves just how much a step above North America is from these other regions. But if they can beat Team Envy, hey, power to them. Group C is another one of those very interesting ones. We have Gambit versus Crazy Raccoons and 100 Thieves versus HAVAN Liberty. Number 1 EMEA versus the number 2 Japan, and the number 2 North America versus the number 2 Brazil. Again, we have those two North America and European representatives that seem like they will dominate those rosters, but if these other teams can prove themselves, it's going to be very interesting. Finally, Group D, we have Sentinels versus G2 in round 1, and we have BREN Esports versus F4Q. Now, this is a bit of an, I don't want to say it's an unlucky role for G2, but going up against Sentinels in round 1 is always going to be an interesting role. But G2 will have the first European swing at the North American powerhouse. So if G2 can take this, it's going to throw everything into question. Now, before we go into my personal predictions on how I think the group stages will shake out, I'm trying to keep this a little more unbiased because I want to just give raw information instead of my personal opinion. I'm going to go over some teams that I think you should look out for and some players you should look out for. If you can't watch the whole tournament, at least try to catch up on these maps or these players or these teams. The 3 teams you need to look out for are 100 Thieves, Gambit, and Vision Strikers. Gambit has possibly the most to prove out of any team here, being the most likely chance to beat the Sentinels. Gambit has looked really, really strong in a lot of their matches that they played in the EMEA. And also the interesting dynamic of having Nats as this boulder on the team where everyone can kind of move around. He's a very, very strong player. And I want to see how he'll do against the Sentinels' aggression. I'm interested in 100 Thieves personally because they have this roster that has kind of revolved around Asuna, a lot of NA. People often claim that these other older players are kind of washed, but this will be their first LAN opportunity, and maybe this will bring some sort of beast back out of them. They actually have Ethan, one of the only North American major CSGO winners, and so I'm interested to see how he'll do back on LAN. They also have Nitro, they have Hiko, they have Steel, all these guys back in action. The final team, Vision Strikers. Vision Strikers, I love this team so much. They're so interesting as an idea, as they've dominated the Korean region for a very long time. They did just miss out for Masters 2. They've lost, canonically, 2 games in their entire life cycle as an esports org. So getting this team to the international and being able to play other international teams, it'll be super interesting to see how they'll do. There are a lot of players I think you should look out for, but the top 3 players that I think you really, really should keep an eye on are Ye, CNED, and Forsaken. Now, these are kind of baby answers, but I'm truly interested in these players, especially from a North American point of view. Of course, we have Ye, who has been the hottest new pickup in North America. I've been watching his stats for a little bit since about stage 2, and you've been able to see that he is a cut above the rest. But will he be able to keep this dominance up for Envy going internationally? I think all these 3 players are duelists and have this same sort of fragging role, so of course they're going to have better stats, but once they go up against each other, we'll see the shakedown of who is better than who. Then, of course, we have CNED, the next best Jet. This match between him and Tens and him and Ye are going to be super interesting to see who will get the first picks, most first bloods, first blood to first death kill ratio, whatnot. It's going to be super interesting. Finally, Forsaken, because Forsaken has a lot to prove. He is in that 2nd seed from SEA, and he's going up against Vision Strikers first as well in sort of the death pool of Vision Strikers, ACEND, and SMB as all of their opponents. So if he can do very well compared to these guys, then he is the real deal. I feel like he's been put in this position where he now has something to prove. Finally, my thoughts on the tournament. I'm going to throw up my sort of tier list of how I think things will shake out right here. I think the Sentinels are almost guaranteed this tournament again because they're such a strong team. But I think if anyone were to take it from them, it would be Gambit and Supermassive Blaze from Europe. I think they both have incredibly solid rosters that can prove themselves even better than Team Liquid did and Fnatic did as a European representatives last time. I think if anyone is to beat them, it will be these 2 teams, because on your way to winning the tournament, you will almost certainly need to beat the Sentinels. I think we have ACEND, Envy, 100 Thieves, and even I'll throw Vision Strikers up there too, because I think they're all very strong rosters. I think they'll be hyper competitive with each other. Of course, we'll see one of these teams actually knocked out in the group stages, as we have Supermassive Blaze, ACEND, and Vision Strikers all in the same group. Group A, Group of Death. For these teams, it will kind of be the proving ground for their region, being North America, Europe, and Korea. Just underneath that, who I think will do well at this tournament, we have the Brazilian teams. Maybe they can even take sets off of that tier above them, but I don't think they'll be able to reach that top level. I'll also throw Crew in there because they have been such a dominant force in their region. I think they will take some of that over with them. Then, just underneath that, I'm going to throw in Paper Rex, BREN, and F4Q, as well as the Japanese teams. I think they're all very, very strong in the region, but I think on a global scale, I think they're going to struggle a little bit, especially against some of those North America and European teams. Now, if they prove me wrong, hey, awesome. I love watching Japan esports, especially the time they play. It's so much fun watching them play. But I think when it's that strong of competition, I think they'll kind of get washed. But again, we'll see how the tournament goes. That is all the information I have. I've also linked some resources down below if you want to get more information on this tournament. There's this Reddit thread that goes over some of these stats, some of the maps, things you should look out for in even more detail than I'm giving here. This is hopefully just kind of like a primer video. If you want to do even more research, hey, feel free. And if you want to share this video around, hey, I'm not opposed to that. I feel like this video, I wanted to give a whole overview of the tournament for someone that hasn't really been following a lot of the international scenes and just wants to watch this tournament and have a fun time. Hopefully this video kind of is a guide for you through the tournament. And hey, the number one thing that you can do for this tournament is subscribe to me. I'm going to give even more updates on the teams, on the competitive scene as a whole. I feel like I'm one of the only Valorant YouTube people that make discussion videos about the competitive scene. So if you're interested in that, hey, check out these videos. If there's any video I'd recommend from myself, I'd say watch this 6-man rosters video to really understand what my content kind of is like. If you want to talk more esports, feel free to join my Discord. It's just a bunch of goons talking about esports and whatnot. You can come watch some Masters 3 with us. I think we'll probably do a watch party or something. But hey, no pressure. You can also follow me on Twitter. Twitter's a good one too. I have no followers, which means that it's very hard to convince people to talk to me. But that is all for the video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good one, and I hope you enjoy Masters 3 Berlin. Hope it's a good one.